Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. What happens when an obsessed HOA tries to fine a homeowner who isn't even a member of their association? I watched for weeks as they piled on the threats and the fake penalties, just waiting for the perfect moment to show them the one map that would end their careers. Ready to see a bully hit a brick wall? I need to tell you about something that happened recently that still makes me grin every time I think about it. It involves an overzealous HOA, a shed, and the sweetest revenge I never even had to plan. But first, some background. About 5 years ago, I was house hunting. I work in project management, so I'm the kind of person who reads every line of a contract and keeps copies of everything. My job has made me detail-oriented to a fault, and honestly, it's saved my butt more than once. When I was looking at houses, I kept running into the same problem. Every decent property in my price range was in one of those cookie-cutter subdivisions with an HOA, you know the type. Beige houses as far as the eye can see, rules about what color you can paint your mailbox, fines if your grass is half an inch too tall. I hate that stuff. I wanted a place where I could actually, live without someone measuring my lawn with a ruler. Then my realtor showed me this one property. It was a 1970s brick ranch house, single story, sitting on a half-acre lot, nice big yard with this beautiful old oak tree out front. But here's the interesting part, it was completely surrounded by one of those massive HOA subdivisions that got built in the late 1990s. The whole development went up around this one house because the original owner refused to sell to the developer. My realtor explained it to me while we were standing in the driveway. He said the property was grandfathered in and not subject to the HOA rules. For most people, being the odd house out would be a negative. For me, it was the number one selling point. I bought the place within a week. For 5 years, everything was great. My house has character. It's got that natural-looking garden, the big oak tree, flower beds that actually look like flowers grow there instead of some landscaping company installing them. Meanwhile, all around me are these identical two-story beige houses with lawns that look like they've been painted green. I've heard stories from my neighbors about the HOA. One guy got fined for leaving his trash can out 4 hours after pickup. Another got written up because her porch trim was the wrong shade of white. The approved color was something like eggshell, but hers was ivory. They made her repaint. I just smiled, waved at my neighbors when I saw them, and enjoyed my HOA-free existence. Now I have a hobby. I do woodworking. Nothing fancy, just small projects. Cutting boards, bookshelves, that kind of thing. For years, I'd been working out of my garage, but it was cramped and I had to move the car every time I wanted to use my table saw. I'd been saving up for a long time to build a proper workshop in my backyard. This wasn't going to be some cheap metal shed from a big box store. I wanted something nice, something that would last and actually look good. I hired a contractor, drew up proper plans, and went through all the official channels. I pulled permits from the city, got the plans approved by the building department, did everything by the book. The city inspector came out twice during construction to check the foundation and the framing. Everything passed. The shed, or workshop really, is beautiful. It's got proper wood siding that matches my house, a shingled roof, real windows. It sits way back on my property, barely visible from the street. It's tucked behind some trees, and you'd have to really be looking for it to even notice it from the road. Construction finished on a Saturday. The contractor shook my hand. I paid the final invoice, and I spent the rest of the weekend moving in my tools and setting up my workbenches. I was thrilled. This was exactly what I'd been dreaming about for years. The following Friday, I came home from work and found a white envelope taped to my front door. Not in my mailbox, mind you. Taped right to the door. I pulled it off and opened it while I was still standing on the porch. It was from something called the Willow Creek Estates HOA Architectural Review Committee. I had to read it twice because I genuinely thought it was a joke at first. The letter was aggressive and condescending in equal measure. It informed me that I had erected an unauthorized auxiliary structure on my property, which was apparently a flagrant violation of Article 7, Section 4 of their covenants, conditions, and restrictions. The letter went on to demand that I remove the shed immediately. I had 14 days. If I didn't remove it, they would start fining me $100 per day. I stood there on my porch holding this letter, and I started to laugh. Not an angry laugh, a genuine, amused laugh. I went inside, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat down at my desk. I pulled out the folder where I keep all my property documents. My deed was right there on top. I read through the relevant section again just to make sure I wasn't misremembering. Nope. Right there in black and white, my property parcel was explicitly excluded from the HOA. It said so right in the deed. I could have just ignored the letter, thrown it away, and gone on with my life. But here's the thing about bullies. If you ignore them, they just keep pushing. And I had a feeling this wasn't going to be a one-time thing, so I decided to handle it properly and create a paper trail. I drafted an email to the address on the letter. I kept it polite but firm. I acknowledged that I'd received their letter about the shed. I said that to ensure I was in full compliance with any applicable regulations, I needed them to provide two things. First, a copy of the specific rule they cited. Second, proof that my property was actually subject to their rules. I thanked them for their time and hit send. A few days later, I got a reply. It didn't come from the generic committee email address. It came from someone who signed herself as the chairperson of the Architectural Review Committee. I won't use her real name, but let's just call her the chairperson. Her email was dismissive. She wrote that the rules apply to everyone in the community to protect property values. She said my home was clearly within the boundaries of the subdivision. She attached a 50-page PDF of their rules and regulations. What she didn't attach was any actual proof that those rules applied to me. The email ended with a not-so-subtle reminder that the fine would start if I didn't remove the structure. I replied simply. I thanked her for the document, but pointed out that she still hadn't provided proof my property was legally subject to these rules. I said I was requesting this documentation again, and that until I received it, I didn't acknowledge any authority of the HOA over my property. That's when things escalated. A week later, I got a certified letter. This one wasn't polite anymore. It stated that fines had already begun, and I now owed $300. $300 for having a legally permitted structure on my own property that had nothing to do with their HOA. Around this same time, one of my neighbors texted me. He's a nice guy who lives in the HOA but doesn't like the board. He said the chairperson had been ranting about my illegal shed at the board meeting. He said she was on a warpath and I should watch out. I thanked him for the heads up. I wasn't worried exactly, but I was definitely paying attention now. Then one morning I was getting ready for work and I looked out my front window. The chairperson was standing on the sidewalk in front of my house with her phone out, taking pictures, not trying to hide it at all. She was photographing my house and my shed from every angle she could manage from the public sidewalk. I walked outside and just stood there on my porch, watching her. She saw me, we made eye contact, and she smiled. Not a friendly smile, a smug smile, like she thought she was really doing something. Then she turned and walked away. That was the moment it became personal for me. This wasn't just about some administrative mix-up anymore. This was harassment. The final notice arrived 2 weeks later. This one came from a law firm that apparently represented the HOA. It was full of legal language clearly designed to scare me. It said I now owed over $1,000 in fines, and if I didn't pay and remove the shed within 7 days, they would place a lien on my property and begin foreclosure proceedings. Foreclosure. Over a shed, on property they had no authority over. Most homeowners would panic at this point, but I'd been preparing. Right after that first letter, I'd gone to the county records office. Actually, I just used their online portal because it's 2024 and everything is digitized now. I pulled 3 key documents. First, a certified copy of my property deed, the same one I'd already read, but now with the county recorder's official stamp on it. The deed explicitly states that my parcel is not now, nor shall it ever be subject to the covenants, conditions, and restrictions of the Willow Creek Estates development. It's right there in plain English. Second, I got the official county plat map from when the subdivision was developed back in the 1990s. The map shows the entire development with all the lots clearly marked. And there, right in the middle of it all, is my property with a thick black line drawn around it. The legend on the map labels it as an exclusion parcel. Third, I had copies of all my building permits for the shed. City approved, inspected, completely legal according to municipal code. I spent an evening drafting a letter. Not an email this time. A formal letter. I sent it via certified mail with return receipt requested. I sent copies to the law firm, to the HOA management company, and to every single member of the HOA board. I got their names and addresses from the HOA's public website. The letter was professional but firm. I started by listing every single piece of correspondence I'd received with dates. I pointed out that I had requested proof of jurisdiction multiple times and never received it. Instead, the HOA had chosen to escalate with threats of illegal fines and unlawful liens. I wrote that I was attaching 3 documents: the plat map excluding my property deed which explicitly exempts it from their rules, and the city-approved permits for my shed. Then I got to the good part. I stated clearly that their actions constituted a pattern of harassment: the trespassing to take photographs, the repeated threats of illegal fines, the threat to place a fraudulent lien on my property, all of it. I demanded that they cease and desist all communication and actions against me and my property immediately. I stated that all their violation notices were void and all their alleged fines were invalid. And here's where I twisted the knife a little. I demanded a formal written apology from the HOA Board of Directors for the stress and duress their actions had caused. I made it clear that if I received any further threatening contact, or if they made any attempt to cloud my property's title, I would be forwarding everything to an attorney to pursue all available legal remedies, including suing them for harassment and recovering my legal fees. I signed it, printed out 6 copies, and drove to the post office. I sent everything certified mail. Then I went home and waited. The response was faster than I expected. Within 48 hours of those letters being delivered, my phone rang. It was a senior partner from the law firm. He was apologizing profusely for what he called a grievous administrative error. I didn't discuss anything with him on the phone. I told him politely but firmly that all communication needed to be in writing. He agreed immediately and hung up. I could hear the panic in his voice. A week later, another letter arrived. This one was on the law firm's official stationery. It formally retracted all fines and violation notices. It included a stiff, very formal apology from the HOA board president for the misunderstanding. I noticed that the chairperson's name was nowhere on the letter. My friendly neighbor texted me a few days after that with the rest of the story. Apparently there had been an emergency executive session of the HOA board. The chairperson had been called in and absolutely torn apart for her lack of due diligence. She'd exposed the HOA to serious legal liability by threatening to lien a property they had no authority over. They could have been sued into oblivion if I'd wanted to push it. She was immediately removed from her position as chairperson of the Architectural Review Committee. From what I heard, she tried to argue and defend herself, but the board president shut her down. They were furious with her. Now here's the satisfying part. I still see her around the neighborhood sometimes. I go for walks in the evening and occasionally our paths cross. Without fail, every single time, she will cross to the other side of the street to avoid walking past my house. She won't make eye contact, won't acknowledge me at all. The power dynamic has completely flipped. A few months have passed since all this happened. I'm sitting in my workshop right now as I write this, actually. The door is open because it's a nice day and there's a breeze coming through. My tools are all organized on the walls. My workbench is solid and level. I've got a project in progress, a small cabinet for my wife. I can see out the door into my backyard, across my property line to where the identical beige houses start. Sometimes I think about the whole situation and I just shake my head. It's wild how quickly bullies back down when you confront them not with anger, but with documentation and facts. They wanted a fight. They showed up with opinions and assumptions and threats. I showed up with certified copies of legal documents and a clear paper trail. Every time I flip on the lights in here, I smile. This workshop is more than just a building where I do woodworking. It's a reminder of property rights and personal freedom. It's a monument to the importance of doing your research and knowing your rights. But more than anything, it's a reminder of that day I taught an entire HOA board a lesson they'll never forget. Before you start throwing your weight around and making threats, you better make damn sure you actually have the authority to do it. Before you try to find someone, maybe check if they're even in your HOA. And before you come after someone's property, you might want to verify that their property is actually yours to regulate. The shed is still there, obviously. Still beautiful. Still completely legal. Still absolutely none of the HOA's business. And every time the former chairperson crosses the street to avoid me, I'm reminded that sometimes the best revenge isn't the revenge you plan. Sometimes it's just standing your ground with the truth and watching bullies crumble when they realize they picked the wrong target. I built my workshop on my land, with my money, following my city's rules. Not the HOA's rules, because I'm not in the HOA. I never was, and now everyone knows it. The funny thing is, I never wanted any of this drama. I just wanted to build a shed and do some woodworking in peace. But they couldn't leave well enough alone. They had to push and threaten and harass. And in the end, all they accomplished was humiliating themselves and losing one of their board members. I've got neighbors now who wave at me with actual respect. Not the polite distance waves from before, but genuine acknowledgement. A few of them have come by to see the workshop. One guy told me he wished he'd bought a property outside the HOA, too. He seemed genuinely envious. The whole experience taught me something important. Bullies rely on people being too intimidated to stand up to them. The HOA board was used to homeowners just complying with whatever they demanded because most people don't want the hassle of fighting back. They assumed I'd be the same way. They thought they could throw around threats and legal-sounding language and I'd panic and tear down a $10,000 workshop just to make them happy. They were wrong. I didn't fight them with aggression or threats of my own. I fought them with facts, with documents, with patient, methodical proof that they had no leg to stand on. And that turned out to be far more effective than any angry confrontation could have been. When I told my wife about the final letter and the apology, she laughed so hard she cried. She'd been worried throughout the whole thing that we'd end up in some protracted legal battle. I kept telling her it wouldn't come to that because I knew I was right. Not opinion right. Factually, legally, documentably right. She asked me if I felt bad about getting the chairperson removed from her position. I thought about it for a minute and told her honestly that I didn't. The woman had harassed me, threatened me, and tried to extort money from me for something I had every legal right to do. She'd taken photos of my property without permission from the sidewalk, which was technically legal but definitely creepy. She'd ignored multiple requests for proof of jurisdiction and just kept escalating anyway. She brought all of this on herself. If she'd done even 5 minutes of basic research before sending that first letter, none of this would have happened. If she'd responded to my first email with an apology and an acknowledgement that there had been a mistake, it would have ended there. Instead, she chose to double down and get aggressive. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. I keep all the documentation in a file folder in my office. The original threatening letters, my responses, the certified mail receipts, the final apology. I probably don't need to keep it all, but something about having that paper trail makes me feel secure. If they ever tried anything again, which I seriously doubt they will, I've got everything documented. My contractor stopped by a few weeks ago to drop off some extra materials he'd had left over from another job. He asked how the workshop was working out. I told him about the whole HOA situation. He stood there in my driveway laughing and shaking his head. He said in 20 years of building sheds and garages and workshops, he'd never heard of an HOA trying to regulate a property that wasn't even in the HOA. He called it the most ridiculous thing he'd encountered. I showed him the final apology letter. He read it, handed it back to me, and said I should frame it. I actually considered it. There's something deeply satisfying about being absolutely, unquestionably right in a dispute. Not just feeling like you're right, but having documentary proof that you're right. It's a rare thing in life. Most arguments come down to opinions and perspectives. This one didn't. This one was simple fact. My property is not in the HOA. Therefore, the HOA has no authority over my property. Therefore, their fines were invalid and their threats were baseless. End of story. The workshop is everything I hoped it would be. I've finished 3 projects since I moved in. The cabinet for my wife turned out great. I made a bookshelf for my office, and I just completed a toy chest for my nephew's birthday. The space works perfectly, good lighting, plenty of room, all my tools within easy reach. Sometimes when I'm out there working on a Saturday morning, I'll hear the sounds of the neighborhood. Lawnmowers running on perfect schedule because everyone knows the HOA has rules about lawn maintenance. I'll hear the distant sound of someone getting lectured about their fence color or their mailbox placement. And I'll smile and go back to my project, grateful that I did my research 5 years ago when I bought this place. Grateful that the original owner refused to sell out to the developer. Grateful that I have the freedom to build what I want on my own land without asking permission from a bunch of busybodies on a power trip. The HOA learned an expensive lesson. Not expensive in money, though I'm sure their legal bills weren't cheap for dealing with this mess. Expensive in reputation and credibility. Word got around the neighborhood about what happened. I didn't spread it, but my friendly neighbor did. And once one person knows something in a subdivision like this, everyone knows it within a week. Now the HOA board is more careful. I've heard from neighbors that they actually verify jurisdiction before sending violation notices now. Apparently, this whole situation scared them straight. They realized that if they'd actually tried to lien my property, I could have sued them into bankruptcy. A fraudulent lien is serious business. The law firm they hired probably explained that to them in very clear terms. You can't just threaten to foreclose on property you have no legal claim to. That's not how any of this works. I wonder sometimes what the chairperson thinks when she sees my shed. She can see it from certain angles in the neighborhood when she's driving by. Does she feel embarrassed, angry, regretful that she pushed so hard on something she should have verified first? I'll never know because she won't talk to me, and honestly, that's fine. I don't need her apology or her acknowledgement. I already got the official apology from the board. That's enough for me. The best part of all of this is that I never set out for revenge. I never wanted to humiliate anyone or get anyone fired from their volunteer position. I just wanted to build my shed in peace. They came after me. They threatened me. They tried to bully me into compliance, and all I did was stand my ground with facts and documentation. That's the beautiful irony of the whole situation. They created their own destruction. Every threatening letter they sent, every fine they levied, every aggressive action they took just dug the hole deeper. I didn't have to do anything except respond professionally and provide proof of what I already knew to be true. Sometimes the best revenge really is just living well and letting bullies destroy themselves. My workshop stands as a testament to that principle. Every board I cut, every joint I glue, every project I complete in there is a quiet victory. Not over the HOA specifically, but over the idea that people in positions of petty power can push others around without consequences. They learned that not everyone will roll over when threatened. Some people will stand their ground, and if you pick the wrong person to bully, someone who keeps good records and knows their rights, you might just end up being the one who loses everything. I taught them a lesson they'll never forget, not through aggression or escalation, but through patience, documentation, and an unwavering commitment to the facts. Before you start throwing rocks at someone, make damn sure they don't live in a brick house that isn't even on your street. And that's exactly what they learned, the hard way. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I work at a niche retail store located in the heart of town. Our customers are dedicated and often travel from afar just to visit us, so having a clear and accessible parking lot is crucial for our business. Unfortunately, our next-door neighbors, a family-run landscaping and garden supply store, have been a thorn in our side for years when it comes to parking. The tension between my boss and the landscaping store owner goes back over a decade before I joined, all over something trivial. I know the landscaper once complained about a tree on our side of the lot, which was unsightly for their customers. It was the pettiest neighbor drama you could imagine, but it festered for years. The final straw came after the Rona, when the physical business in town started picking back up and our parking lot started overflowing with cars again, many belonging to the landscaping store's customers. See, our two parking lots are connected. Ours is about twice the size of his, but the landscaper had decided to reserve almost all his spots for his landscaping vans. Ironically, those vans are rarely even there during business hours. As a result, his customers just parked in our lot, leaving us with few spaces for our own customers. My boss, trying to be reasonable, approached the landscaper with a suggestion. Maybe they could adjust their parking setup to free up a few more spaces for customers, and that their vans were welcome to park in our lot, if their lot was ever full. But the landscaper shot down the idea immediately, insisting that it was absolutely crucial to reserve all of those spaces for his vans, even though they were rarely there during the day. The conversation turned heated, ending with my boss threatening to put up a fence to separate the lots and enforce parking. The landscaper, practically daring him, shot back, "Go ahead." Probably knowing how expensive that would be. As you can imagine, it ended with both men storming off and not speaking for 2 years. Typical neighbor stuff. Fast forward to recently, and we got a golden opportunity when a parking management company approached us with a proposal. They offered to install automated license plate cameras to enforce parking, allowing us to find vehicles that stayed beyond a generous 3-hour free window if they hadn't paid. The setup would be free, we'd get most of the revenue, and they would keep any fines issued. It was perfect, especially since we were losing spaces to freeloaders, wouldn't really impact the customers of the nearby stores, and if anyone had a good reason to park there for longer, then we could give them an extension at our discretion. However, for the cameras to work, they needed to cover both our entrance and the landscaping store's entrance. Being the considerate neighbor, again, my boss had the parking company rep reach out to the landscaper to explain the deal and benefits. But true to form, the landscaper didn't even let the rep finish before kicking him out. making it very clear that under no circumstances would his lot become a paid parking zone. Instead of going through the hassle of putting up the necessary expensive fence, my boss had a better idea. Big rocks. One of his construction buddies had a stash of leftover rocks from a recent project and offered to place them for a great price. The parking company even agreed to front the cost, to be repaid through future parking revenue. On Monday morning, before opening hours, one of the buddy's employees, a big burly guy with arms like tree trunks, arrived with a truck and crane to place the rocks. The rocks were neatly spaced to allow pedestrians to pass with carts, but completely blocked vehicle access. The landscaper stormed out, yelling and trying to intimidate the worker into stopping. But the worker, unfazed, calmly told him to step back for his own safety, which made the much smaller landscaper back down and retreat in frustration. The rocks weren't just a physical barrier. They quickly became a mental obstacle for the landscaper's employees. Their muscle memory kept bringing them into our lot, only for them to realize too late that they couldn't drive through anymore. We watched from our newly installed surveillance cameras, just in case the neighbor tried anything, trying not to burst out laughing as their vans ended up awkwardly stuck. They'd have to reverse out and go all the way around to their own entrance, only to perform a series of painful maneuvers to squeeze into their now much smaller parking area. At one point, we even caught one of their rushing vans clipping a rock while trying to maneuver. A little bonus for our viewing pleasure. The next day, the parking company arrived to install the license plate cameras and set up the signage, which took a few hours. Throughout the installation, the landscaper's family members were prowling around our lot, snapping photos and videos as if they were on a mission to find a violation. But the parking company was very professional and had done everything by the book, so there was nothing for them to report. In the meantime, my boss was positively glowing with satisfaction as he helped direct the installation. Here's the best part. We noticed that the neighbor's family had started parking their personal vehicles in our lot, likely out of spite to mess with us. One day, my coworker saw one of the family members dash out of their store and sprint to their car. We thought it was odd at the time, but didn't think much of it until the following week when the landscaper's son came into our store looking a bit embarrassed. Apparently, he had accidentally overstayed the 3-hour limit and received a $150 fine. The son practically begged us to waive it, insisting it was just a simple mistake. My boss politely responded, "Oh, I'd really love to help, but it's out of our control now. The parking company handles all the fines." The look on his face was priceless. He left, shoulders slumped, retreating back to their store. Ever since, our lot has been blissfully clear, and our customers have had no trouble finding spaces. Meanwhile, the landscapers have been grumbling as they have a harder time maneuvering their vans, still trying to pretend they're not bothered. As for my boss, he's been smiling a lot more lately. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people get exactly what they asked for. The next one is an entitled people story. My freshman year of college, I, currently 26F, became really close with this girl. Let's call her Avery. She and I were the same age, same major, and we had almost everything in common. We immediately became the best of friends, and that quickly became extremely toxic for many reasons. We had the same opinions on almost everything, but the things we disagreed on? They became huge deals even if they weren't. She was one of those people who, if she didn't like someone, you weren't allowed to like that person either. If she thought a song was great, you had to think that song was great too. If I expressed anything that differed from her, a big blowout would ensue. But I had also never felt closer to someone. Literally never met someone who was so like me in so many ways aside from what seemed to me like jealousy, maybe? I still don't really know. Anyway, about 3/4 of the way through my freshman year, she has a big blowout on me because she finds out I like the show Sex Education, and she thinks that show is racist because it has no POC characters. I tell her it does, in fact have POC characters. Quite a few of them. Apparently that was the last straw for her, LOL, because she cut me off for this comment even, and we didn't talk for nearly 7 months. Fast forward to November the following year, I randomly get a long DM from Avery saying how sorry she is, how much she misses me, how she wishes she could make it right. I'm immediately accepting because I'm a forgiving ass person to a fault. Trauma response. We meet up a week later, get matching tattoos, and instantly we're hanging out every day, all day again like nothing ever happened. In fact, she's even more close and supportive and less argumentative than before. Everything is great. Suddenly her car breaks down. She also just got fired from her job the week before. She lives in the middle of nowhere with her awful grandmother. I live 2 hours away in the city. I tell her, come live with me until you can get on your feet. I know what it's like to have nothing going for you in a small town with no way to get around. She moves in with me. No job, no savings, no car. She's been at my place for a week, job hunting online, when all of a sudden she has a medical emergency. Usually I wouldn't downplay something like that, but she really never had any paperwork or evidence of what she claimed to be dealing with, and her symptoms would come and go whenever it was most convenient for her, it seemed. She isn't going to be able to work for at least a few weeks. So I am paying for everything. I never asked her for rent money because it was never meant to be a permanent thing. I'm buying her food, taking her to appointments, paying her phone bill for 2 months. Finally, I said enough. I got her an interview at my retail job and she got hired. Then she missed the first week and a half of work for another medical emergency and I had to cover her shifts. At this point I was getting annoyed. After a couple months of working there, calling out at least once a week and making me look terrible because I recommended her. She gets off a few hours before me one night. I ask her to pick up stuff for dinner. She does. I get home and she immediately hits me with, "You need to send me $12 for groceries." I look at the receipt sitting inside the bag. The total for the entire grocery haul was $12 and some change. Mind you, this is not a lot of money. I could easily send it. But I have also been paying for everything for this girl for almost 5 months at this point, and even though she's had a job for months, I'm still paying her way for everything. I even paid the full adoption fee for the cat we adopted together. Remember this, it's important later. I've given her a place to live, a job, food, W33D, a cat, friendship, morning coffees I couldn't afford, and she's gonna ask me to cover the entire $12 dinner? Like, girl. I was over it. I told her I would send her $6 because that was half, and she was also eating the food. She began to moan and groan about how she was awful and absolutely ridiculous for expecting to get reimbursed. How she should never ask for anything ever again, and she's just the worst friend ever. All in that sarcastic, feel bad for me tone of voice. I stood there and said, "No, I don't think you understand. You are a leech." She immediately got up and tried to fight me. Luckily, I shoved her off and got up to my room and locked the door. I listened as she packed her stuff and left. She called a friend to come get her because, again, no car LOL. When I went downstairs after she had left, I discovered that the cat that I paid to adopt was gone. She stole my ducking cat. I don't care that she's the one that found the cat. I paid for her, she's my baby. I've still never seen my poor kitty to this day, almost 5 years later. Turns out she ended up going to live with the friend who came to pick her up, who lived with her boyfriend of nearly 3 years at the time. Within a month, that friend was homeless and Avery was still living in that apartment dating the friend's boyfriend. They ended up getting engaged and moving to Florida before breaking it off, from what I hear. Good riddance. The friend who was impacted and I are very good friends now, so at least there's that. Anyway, thank you for watching.